It's the greatest gift that I possess, said the great Ken Dodd. But it's a big, complicated subject, isn't it, happiness? So big, in fact, that we're going to cover it in 2 videos. Today, in part 1, we're going to look at what is happiness and where does it come from? What is happiness? Well, psychologists refer to it as a mental or emotional state of well-being characterized by positive and pleasant emotions ranging from contentment to joy. So you've got a scale really of happiness ranging from joy, which is that amazing feeling when something spectacular happens for you, like you win something, that kind of thing, right down to contentment, which is that feeling that you're just kind of ticking along but you're generally happy with your lot in life. Now, this end of the scale, the joy end, is very hard. It's great, but it's very hard to sustain that for long periods of time. It kind of comes and then it goes. But the contentment side is probably something we should be aiming for, that kind of idea that we're happy with our lot in life. That's the general feeling of happiness that we're going to talk about on these videos. So where does happiness come from? Well, there's been some quite serious studies done recently about this, and a couple of factors have come up. Firstly, there may well be a genetic element. There's a gene called 5-HTT, which if you're born with it, you're probably going to have a disposition to be happier than people who are born without it. So yes, you can actually be born happy. The next thing to say though is one of the big influences is personal experiences. So what happens to you and how you react to what happens to you in your life will have an effect over the years. And that brings up that sort of classic nature versus nurture debate, which I don't think there's any concrete answers to. But you can see how both of those things will have an influence on your state of mind. The next thing really to say is that some people have what are called intrinsic values. Now, people with intrinsic values tend to be happier. Now, intrinsic values is where you put a bigger value on the internal things. So things like your sense of fulfillment, your sense of your personal development, your place in the world, your personal relationships, how you work on those and support the people who are close to you. If those things are more important to you, you are probably in the long term going to be more happy than people who have extrinsic values. Now, extrinsic values are essentially external things, so things like objects or recognition or status or money. So if people tend to see those things as the source of their happiness, i.e. stuff, in the long term they tend to be less happy than people who have intrinsic values and tend to value more internal things or their personal relationships, etc. Part of the reason for that is for a start, it's very hard not to be focused on extrinsic values because we're bombarded with this stuff on a daily basis through advertising and marketing. You're constantly being told your life will be happier, will be better if you buy this car or go on this holiday or look like this or wear this or own that or have this TV, etc. You're constantly getting these messages that you will be happier if you have these things and these experiences. The reality is they're telling you that because they're trying to sell things. And the fact is the opposite is usually true. If you start basing your happiness on these extrinsic values, they call it a conveyor. What happens is you say, well, I will be happy if I have the latest iPhone. The problem is next year a new iPhone comes out and all of a sudden you haven't got the latest anymore. You need to get that one. And then the year after that, there's another one and there's another one. And it's the same with any material goods. There's never a point where it's finished. There's always more things they're trying to sell you. So you end up on this conveyor belt of constantly chasing happiness through buying, accumulating more and more stuff. It's not good for you, and the end outcome is rarely positive. It's much healthier if you have these intrinsic values, where you're focused on yourself and your fulfillment and the sense of how you fit into the world and your sense of contentment, and you're about sustaining those positive personal relationships with your friends and your family and the people who are close to you. If you work on those and you focus on those and you focus on contribute to your community and to your own life. In the long term, those people tend to come out a lot happier than the people on the extrinsic side of the scale. Also, people with what's called a growth mindset tend to be happier than people who have what we call a fixed mindset. Now, a fixed mindset is where people see the world and they see their lot in it as set in stone, i.e. this is the way it is, deal with it, you can't do anything about it, it's a done deal. That's what we call a fixed mindset. They don't turn out as happy as people who have what's called a growth mindset. And the reason for that is people with a growth mindset tend to see their situation as temporary. It doesn't matter what's going on right now because I can get stronger, I can learn more, I can develop, I can work at things, and down the line my situation will improve. So whatever I'm in at the moment is temporary because I can do something about it. That's a growth mindset. If you have that mindset and you can develop it, that's the good news, you can develop a growth mindset with practice, you are going to be much happier than people who have a fixed mindset. So there may well be a genetic element. Some people are just naturally happier than others. Your personal experiences will have an effect, but there are things you can do to try and work around those as well if you've had some bad experiences, because we'll talk about that in another video. We're going to look at things like stoicism, where we look at it's not necessarily what happens to you, but it's how you react to it, and your reaction to it often has a longer term effect than the event itself on your happiness anyway. And then there is also what you focus on, what you class as important in life, those intrinsic values, and there's the way you see the world around you. If you can develop that growth mindset that things are only temporary and we can do something about it. It might be hard and it might be difficult, but you can do something about your situation. Then if you can grasp all those things, you are probably going to be more happy. That's where happiness comes from, as opposed to the people who don't do those things or have those things. Interesting subject. What we're going to look at in the part 2 is how you can develop skills and tips and techniques to actually boost your happiness, to actually make the most of what you've got. So there's a lot in there. There's probably about 10 points we can cover in that one. Too much to squeeze into this video. So I hope today's been a nice taster, an intro to the subject, and we're going to get to the real meat of it in part 2. So we'll see you then. Take care and stay safe.